What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the second ever fully inflated football podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Whitman, alter ego That Franchise Guy. So the first podcast went pretty well. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get through the entire thing without having to edit anything out, and we did. So here's to hopefully another round of that. Need to just remember that it's okay to breathe and have a sip of water occasionally. The feedback was really good. I know a lot of you guys miss the graphics from the studs and duds, and I get it. I really do, but a lot of the feedback was good too. Understanding that is a very timely process to not just put the graphics together, but the editing process itself takes longer than I think a lot of people realize. So this allows me to just sit down, record, talk, and upload without having to really commit 4+ hours to that editing process. So that's been good. And then as far as this episode is concerned, I'm excited because this is going to be kind of a special episode. Basically, what we've got is, we've got our studs and duds video every week where we talk about my Madden roster, which has become very popular. Editing EA's ratings. EA's got really inflated ratings, so mine are much more realistic. They're meant for franchise mode, but a lot of my listeners, well, maybe not a lot, I think most of you guys are Madden players, but a good chunk of you guys are just here for the football talk, and that's great. So, you guys can understand that while these are Madden ratings, they totally apply to, how I perceive these players in real life. It's always funny when people are like, oh, this guy's just judging players based on Madden. It's like, that is so uninformed. Like, I am sitting here watching every game every week and just applying what I see. And of course, the PFF resources come into play here as well to the Madden ratings. So anyway, we've got the weekly updates with the studs and duds. But now that we are sitting here at the midway point, I decided to take a bit of a different approach this week. So normally, I'll look at the game itself from just week to week, take notes from what I see, and then cross-reference what I saw with the PFF grades from the week, and then I'll apply the rating changes. Well, this week, instead of going through game by game, what we're going to do is go team by team and do kind of a mid-season review for every team. Now, this podcast itself is just going to be the NFC for time purposes. I'm going to get an AFC version out early next week. I think Tuesday is going to be the day we get that thing done. And then the other thing we're going to do here is talk about midseason awards for both the AFC and the NFC. So it's going to be an exciting podcast. We're also going to do team grades for the midseason based on kind of their expectations going in and how they've met those expectations. So excited to do that. We'll talk more about that when we get to it. And then as far as the podcast goes, it's still not up on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you get your podcasts. Maybe this weekend I will be able to get to that. I'm still trying to do some research on the best way to get that done. But for now, make sure you're hitting the like on YouTube here, and then I will let you know ASAP when that is up on Google Play or whatever. Maybe by the time we do that Tuesday podcast, I'll have that ready. So let's get into it here. We're going to start with the midseason awards ceremony here. We got a lot of awards to talk about here. So we're going to do the offensive and defensive players for each conference. We're going to do offensive and defensive rookies for each conference. And then across the NFL, we're going to do most improved player, comeback player, best offensive lineman, because I love my hog mollies up front and they don't get enough respect. This should be an award that is much more popular than it is. And then Coach of the Year and MVP. So our NFC Offensive Player of the Year here is going to be Todd Gurley. A lot of good candidates here, but I do think of Offensive Player as a non-quarterback award if possible. Sometimes the skill players just aren't producing enough and you got to give it to a quarterback, but when you look at what Todd Gurley is doing, and there's some other players in the NFC having really special seasons. Other running backs, Alvin Kamara, even Christian McCaffrey's having a great year. There's a lot of great players putting up big numbers. Michael Thomas as well. But Todd Gurley scoring a touchdown every week. He's so integral to what the Rams offense does. And I mean, it's a loaded Rams offense, don't get me wrong. But Todd Gurley, you're not really plugging in Joe Schmo back there and getting the same production that you get from Todd Gurley. He is a problem. So props to Todd Gurley, the NFC Offensive Player of the Year through the midway point. And then the AFC Offensive Player is going to be Deandre Hopkins. And there was even more players that I considered here in the AFC. You got James Conner. His stats are off the charts. You've got Melvin Gordon has been crazy for the Chargers. So I thought about those two. But we are going to go with DeAndre Hopkins, who has been probably the most important, I would say, non-quarterback to their team this year. The physical presence that he brings in the receiving game is so important. And it's not that he's bad at creating separation. He's a very good route runner and all that. He's definitely up there in terms of being in the right place at the right time when the play breaks down. But that physical presence he brings, and just to be able to go over people and make catches, just such a security blanket for Deshaun Watson, and his stats are off the charts. He's on pace for like 1,700 yards and like 18, maybe 15 touchdowns or so. So he's just dominating this year. And then on to defensive players. And pardon my nasally voice, I'm still a little sick. But NFC Defensive Player of the Year, through the first 4 weeks, it was Khalil Mack, but he's been hurt. And the Bears defense has continued to roll on without him. He'll be back and will continue to dominate. But you got to give it to Aaron Donald. 10 sacks on the interior, just continuing his dominance in this league as probably, the most dominant player in terms of being better than the next guy down. There's not another interior lineman that's even close to what Aaron Donald does. And it's ridiculous. He's worth every cent they pay him. And even if he disappears he doesn't truly disappear because he's eating up double teams every play, but even if you don't notice him for a few quarters, he's going to make that critical play in the fourth quarter that we've seen in multiple games this year. And, in an offensive league, just one big sack on third down or a strip fumble in the third quarter, that's the type of $20 million play you're looking for from a defensive pass rusher. And then the AFC Defensive Player of the Year, I struggled with this one a good bit. I actually thought about Trey Flowers for the Patriots. He's really come on lately, but his stats just don't quite back it up, and the Patriots have kind of had a slower start, I guess, defensively. But one player that I think has not necessarily played on the best defense in the league, but has just had an incredible impact coming in his first year on this defense, first year in the NFL, Darius Leonard, 3 forced fumbles, leads the league in tackles, and that's with, I believe, missing at least one game. He's just been incredible. He has sparked that defense from what was just terrible last year to just being a very serviceable defense this year, and has given Andrew Luck a chance to kind of lead these Colts back. And I really think the Colts are going to have a good second half of the year. They may even get into the wild card picture if they can't catch the Texans in their own division. But despite what Andrew Luck has done, Darius Leonard has really sparked a defense that's been under the radar all year. And then moving on to the rookies, we've got the NFC Offensive Rookie. I'm going to give this one to Saquon Barkley. Now, his stats are good, don't get me wrong, but for him to do what he's done, and he leads the NFL in breakaway percentage as a running back, and the Giants' offense has been miserable. But the only reason they've been able to score some points a lot of times is Saquon Barkley and the threat he brings. So he has come in and dominated in this league. I credit to Todd Gurley, but if I'm picking a running back for one game, it might be Saquon Barkley. I'm not sure he isn't the best running back in the NFL. The difference between where Todd Gurley is playing and where Saquon Barkley is playing is literally probably first being the Rams in terms of where I would want to play if I were a running back, and 30th, I don't know, maybe 32nd. So Saquon's having a great year. And then we've got the NFC or AFC Offensive Rookie, And we're going to give this one to Phillip Lindsey as of right now. Now, I don't think he will end up being the guy. I think there's a chance like Sony Michel could come back healthy. He had some good games. Like Baker could win it, even though he's slowed down. But right now, Phillip Lindsey is 6th in the NFL in rushing. He's been a big reason the Broncos have had some production on that offense that has really struggled this year. So Phillip Lindsey, he's a problem. He reminds me of like a faster Dion Lewis a little bit. And I really like him as a player. Great find, undrafted guy out of Colorado. And now we've got the NFC Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I'm going to take the cop-out here. I've got a 3-way split because there's really 3 players that have stood out to me in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And there's not a clear runaway here. And I'm going to say there's 3 guys here that I think would get this award when the season's done based on what they've shown over the last month. And the first guy is Deshaun Hand. He's probably the first guy I would list here. But other thing to note is all 3 of these guys have either missed some games because of injury or were not starters because they were rookies. So Deshaun Hand comes out of Alabama, kind of a hybrid edge interior guy, but he gained 20 pounds to play into this sort of multiple Patricia Belichickian defense here in Detroit. But he's been really starting on the interior, and he's been one of the most dominant pass-rushing interior guys in the NFL. So he's had a great year. I actually don't know what his sack numbers are. All I know is he's got a ton of hurries, and he's making a huge impact for a Detroit defense that really needed pass rush help. And then Layton Vander for the Dallas Cowboys. He has totally come on in the last month. Now, I know the Dallas has had their struggles, but ever since he kind of came into the full starter role as Sean Lee just can't stay healthy, Vander is looking like a great pick out of the first round. And then the other guy who has really emerged in the last 2 weeks, he was injured for like 4 weeks in the middle of the first half of the season. But he's made a big impact on a defense that has come on lately a little bit, and that's Jaire Alexander, cornerback for the Green Bay Packers. Everyone's looking for that kind of lockdown corner right now. I don't know if that's Jaire Alexander right now, but you saw what he did following Brandon Cooks around in LA, and that's not an easy task. And he had a very good game against the Patriots as well. So continue to monitor him as the season goes on. And then our AFC Defensive Rookie of the Year is, of course, going to be Darius Leonard, but also credit to Denzel Ward, who, if Darius Leonard wasn't my NFC Defensive Player of the Year, Denzel Ward has been an incredible rookie corner. I criticized the Browns for taking him with that 4th pick. I still don't know if I would do that because I think Bradley Chubb paired with Myles Garrett, who's also having a great year this year, by the way. I still think that might have been the better long-term plan, but you can debate the importance of corner versus pass rush. You really can't go wrong, I think, with Denzel Ward, who's having a great year. But obviously Darius Leonard is going to be my AFC Defensive Rookie of the Year. So now we've got the Most Improved Award, where we're going to have another Dallas Cowboy on this list. Byron Jones moves from safety to corner. And I really, before the year, kind of laughed at that. Did not think he would be good at all because he's struggled at safety for the better part of his career. I didn't see how he was going to switch to a much harder position and all of a sudden figure things out. He's had a couple struggles the last couple weeks, but you look at his games the first 6-7 games of the year, lights freaking out. Arguably the best corner in the NFL this year. Just a seamless transition over to corner. He's a freak athlete. He's got the size. Unfortunately for Dallas, they're going to have to pay him buku bucks if they want to keep him around based on his performance this year. They could also use the franchise tag on him as well to make sure he is legit before they give him that big deal. But definitely kind of a runaway for me in terms of most improved. I did think about James Conner, but I think James Conner's always been a pretty good running back. I also think he benefits a lot from that offensive line, but now he's just getting the opportunity. If that makes sense. I think he was a pretty good running back coming out. I liked him coming out. And then comeback player of the year, Andrew Luck, obviously didn't play a game last year. He's on pace for arguably his best season, at least statistically. I don't know if he's quite as dominant as he was back when he made that AFC playoff run with basically nobody. But Andrew Luck's having a phenomenal season. And again, really excited to see this Colts team in the second half of this year, led by Luck and Darius Leonard and some players getting healthy there. Getting your starting left tackle, Costanzo, is one of the best pass blockers in the league. And on the receiving end, getting T.Y. Hilton healthy. Look out for the Colts. Now, best offensive lineman. Love this award. I wish this was something that got more hype every year because these offensive linemen are, I think, underpaid. It's so hard to find, especially great tackles, but really guard, center. It's just an underrated position. Doesn't get it talked enough year after year, at least in the last 2 or 3 years. It's the teams with the best offensive linemen that really dominate offensively. We saw it with Dallas a couple of years ago, and the Saints and the Rams as of late. So my best offensive lineman of this year is Terron Armstead. Really just re-breaking out. He was a great tackle 2 years ago, suffered a pretty bad injury, but he is back, and he's dominating. He's the highest rated tackle in the NFL. You can see the impact watching the Saints. Drew Brees just straight up doesn't have to worry about the blind side. But the other thing, and the reason I go with Terron Armstead over David Bakhtiari, who is right there in terms of pass protection this year as far as the PFF grades go, Armstead is a much more physical player. You can pull him and get him on tosses with Alvin Kamara. He's way more athletic and a much better run blocker than David Bakhtiari, and that's why I go with Armstead over David Bakhtiari. Coach of the year, Sean McVay. Really no surprise, and nothing I can really say about Sean McVay that you haven't heard time and time again throughout the year. He's just doing an incredible job with the Rams, and it goes back to last year, but it's translating to this year. And then the MVP of the midway point is going to be Patrick Mahomes for me. Now, I will say I think Drew Brees ultimately wins this award as the Chiefs have more cold weather outdoor games. I do think they're going to have to rely more on that run game. I think Mahomes' interception numbers will continue to rise as Drew Brees will be playing in that dome, who's been so efficient, has the higher quarterback rating. So for the midway point, I will give it to Patrick Mahomes, who has been incredible, but also has an amazing surrounding cast there. Not that Drew Brees doesn't, but I do think Drew Brees ultimately wins it. But there really is no argument to say Patrick Mahomes has not been the MVP of the midway point. So those are the awards. And now we're going to get into the midseason review for every NFC team. And again, I will be doing the AFC on Tuesday, hopefully up on iTunes and Google Play and all that stuff. But how this is going to work is I'm going to give a grade to the team. And that grade is basically, based on what I said about this team in my deep dives in the preseason and the offseason, and kind of how they've responded to that. If I was higher on a team and they've really let us down, then they're going to have a bad grade. If they've suffered a bunch of injuries, that really isn't going to impact anything because there's nothing the team can do about it. This is basically a grade of how they have done with the card they've been dealt, basically. If that makes sense. I think as you see more grades, you'll kind of see what my evaluation is for this. So we're just going to go alphabetically by location. So starting with the Arizona Cardinals here, I'm going to give them an F, the worst grade here in the NFC, I believe. I guess you can't get any worse than that. But I thought this team was actually going to have a pretty decent year. I thought the quarterback position was going to be much more steady than it's been, whether it was going to be Bradford or Rosen. I thought the offensive line, bringing in Justin Pugh, was going to be a little better than it's been, and it's just been a disaster. And I thought the receivers would step up at least a little bit. I thought David Johnson would be able to kind of carry this offense, and he's been kind of an afterthought this year, which is really surprising. One of my biggest surprises of the year there is how bad David Johnson's kind of been. And then defensively, they've just been so average, and I thought the defense would be a lot better. So just no one's really coming in and making an impact here. They're basically just kind of the same team they were 3 years ago, at least, the grand picture of their roster, but everyone's kind of getting a little worse. So now we're going to talk about the roster update from the week for this team. Like I said, we're looking instead of week by week at how they did in one given game and what my rating is and how their performance, at least that week or a couple weeks before, would have changed that rating. This is a more grandiose picture. So you're going to get more movement, a lot of guys to talk about. That's why we're just doing the NFC. But this is where you're going to see, guys who have been kind of either better than expected or less than expected, but haven't had that one big game. This is where we're going to really hit on those players. It's going to be kind of, finding some players that aren't standing out, but over the course of a season have really impressed or unimpressed. So David Johnson is going to go down 2 again here. I still think he's a fantastic running back, a great receiving threat, and has been dealt just a terrible hand here without a lot of help. But we have seen David Johnson in the past without the best surrounding core be one of the best running backs in the NFL, and like I said, he's kind of been an afterthought. So I love David Johnson. I still think he's an incredibly talented running back, but I've kind of shifted on him being the best running back in the NFL, which I would have said heading into this season. And then Jermaine Gresham, he's been fine, but not really a receiving threat, just a blocking tight end. He's going to go down 2 from a 76 to a 74. David Johnson, by the way, a 93 to a 91. I'm going to try and say every rating. And then Mike Upati, just getting older, not been a very good impact on that offensive line at all. If anything, has been a liability, so -2, 77 to a 75. Same thing can be said about Justin Pugh, who they brought in a big free agent signing. He struggled in his last year with the Giants, and he has continued those struggles, so 78 to a 77. And then Chandler Jones, still a really good player, but has not lived up to his last couple seasons, -1, 87 to an 86. Corey Peters, interior defensive lineman here, along with Olsen Pierre. Both these guys are getting older, have had success in run defense in the past, and have not been helping out in run defense. So now a 74 for Peters and a 71 for Olsen Pierre. We do have a couple risers here. It's not all minus for the Cardinals, and not every team's going to be this grim, obviously. The Cardinals starting off with kind of a bang here with the worst grade of the year for the NFC. But Josh Bynes, a veteran middle linebacker here, has kind of made up for what they're getting on the interior defensive line, has played some good run defense. So +1 for Josh Bynes, up to a 73. And then we've got some players in the secondary here to wrap things up. So Jamar Taylor is a guy they brought in from Cleveland. And I thought that was a great signing, or a trade rather, because they really didn't have anyone outside of Patrick Peterson. But it's looking like Cleveland knew what they were doing when they got rid of Jamar Taylor, because he has been a complete non-factor. He's actually been really bad. So -4 for Jamar Taylor, down to a 73. And then a +2 here for Bené Benwickery. Former, starter, good player for the Panthers. He's been around a couple teams now, but he finds a home here in Arizona, and he's kind of stepped up for what Jamar Taylor hasn't been bringing. Taylor, when he's been in, he's been bad, but he's also been a little beat up. So Benwickery's gotten some chances, and he's been the best corner there outside of, obviously, Patrick Peterson. And you could argue that the safety nickel corner, his name's escaping me right now, the kid out of Washington, second year. He's kind of a slot corner type anyway, but Bené Benwickery's been good. And then Antoine Bethea getting older here. He's going to come down to not making much of an impact. And then Trey Boston, who they signed, had a good year for the Chargers last year. He's definitely an underrated player by the league. A lot of these teams seem to not want him. But he does play well when he's out there starting. So Bené Benwickery and Trey Boston, Carolina, who's got some secondary problems this year, might be looking at Arizona and wishing they had those guys back right now. So let's move on. It's going to be a little more positive for pretty much all these other teams. Obviously, Arizona has had a rough year. So the next team is going to be Atlanta here, who I think's actually had a really good year. I gave them a B+, considering all the injuries. Their offense has definitely exceeded expectations. This has been a super explosive offense. They had some criticism based on their kind of play calling with Sarkisian last year, and that has been a total non-conversation this year. Sarkisian's done a great job with this offense. Matt Ryan, I think, is having an incredible season based on, I thought he was really kind of bad last year, frankly. So Matt Ryan's taken a step up, and just this offense as a whole. And then defensively, I didn't think it was a great defense heading into the year, but you lose Deion Jones and Keanu Neal, who were their two best players outside of Desmond Trufant maybe, and things were looking like a train wreck. But they've gotten guys to step up who we're going to talk about here in just a second. But we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball as we review their season. So Ito Smith is a player who has stepped in with the injury to Devonta Freeman. This is a guy out of a small school, Southern Missouri, I think. Something like that. I know it was a yellow school, yellow logo. Anyway, really solid player coming out. Kind of a shifty guy, a Tariq Cohen type of sorts, but in the same way that Cohen has, can be a little crafty running between the tackles and run with a little more power than you'd expect. Now, nothing crazy here. He's just going up +1 from a 70 to a 71, but definitely a player to keep an eye on. And, Tevin Coleman's been playing really well here as well. I thought about raising him, but the PFF grades didn't quite agree. But Coleman's going to be a free agent. And Freeman now getting a little older, dealing with injuries now in multiple seasons. If Coleman leaves, Ito Smith could become a name that we really want to keep an eye on for future seasons. And then Jake Matthews at left tackle has been fantastic this year. Former top 6 pick. Just a really good left tackle, fantastic pass blocker, a great athlete. So he's going to go up 1. He just got paid, so he's not going anywhere. Now we can flip over and talk about this defense that's going to have more risers than you'd expect here. So they've actually played solid defense the last 2-3 weeks. It's a big reason they're going on this win streak. Obviously their offense as well, but did not see their defense stepping up in the way that they have. And a lot of that you can point to Grady Jarrett up front, interior lineman, really just a star guy, a little undersized, but I love those undersized linemen. You look at the best linemen in the NFL. I mean, Aaron Donald, Mike Daniels, Geno Atkins, that's just 3, and those are 3 of the best. Those guys are all by like a typical scouting report would have undersized written, and Grady Jarrett's another one of those guys at just 6 feet. And that there's a reason those guys produce. It's because if your arms are long enough but you're short, you got a serious leverage advantage. And when you're an explosive guy like Grady Jarrett, you're just a handful to block. So Jarrett's going to go up +2, up to an 85. He's really emerging as one of the elite premier interior defenders in this league. And then another guy who's got a similar scouting report as Grady Jarrett, definitely a reason the Falcons took a chance on Deandre Hopkins, who has really come on in the last couple weeks. He's going to get a +2 here, up to a 72. Just keep an eye on him. Starting to get more reps and playing well both in pass rush and run defense. And then we do have a faller here, Robert Alford. This secondary has not been spectacular this year. Robert Alford is having one of his worst years in a while, so he's going to go down just 1 to a 79. And then DeMonte Kazee, this is a player that a lot of Falcons fans have been asking for a raise for the last couple weeks, and I totally get that. He's played really well. Ricardo Allen goes down, and people were critical of why the Falcons didn't bring in anyone else. And DeMonte Kazee, a 5th-round pick last year, who has now gained 20 pounds. I love that. He was very light last year, 5'11", 174, but now gains 20 pounds. He's up to 194, but does not seem to have lost a step. So a huge jump for him, +4 from 69 to a 73. Could definitely continue to go up here if he continues to play well. A rangy center fielder who can also come into the box and punch you in the mouth a little bit. Still a little smaller, but a really good rangy guy, similar to what they had in Ricardo Allen. So that's it for Atlanta. Again, a B+ for their midseason grade. And then our next team, we're going to stay in the division. We've got the Carolina Panthers here, and they're going to get an A- before the Thursday night game yesterday. Probably would have been an A, but this is a team that I've kind of said is a little overrated. My power rankings every week, they've been the team the last 3-4 weeks that Panthers fans are just calling me crazy for ranking them like 9, 10, 11, 12 the last few weeks. I think they've gone up like one spot every week. But anyway, this offense has definitely played well considering the injuries to the tackle positions. But really last night was the first time we really saw the effects of losing your starting tackles. They did not hold up the same way that they have all year on that offensive line. And then defensively, Carolina has been exactly who we kind of thought they would be. A really good front seven and a secondary with an old safety position and some young corners that you don't really trust. And we saw that secondary get absolutely exploited by the Steelers, and I think that's exactly what this Carolina defense is. It's just a solid defense that you can attack if you have good receivers and a quarterback that's willing to throw deep. So an A- for Carolina. Don't get me wrong, they've had a good year, and they've done some really special things on the offensive side of the ball. So let's talk about the risers and fallers from the year. Mostly risers here for Carolina. So Christian McCaffrey is going to get a little love. I've never been a huge Christian McCaffrey guy. I did not think they should have taken him number 8, but I've come around on it a little bit. If I went back, I still probably wouldn't do it. He's been a great impact this year, though. And in the modern NFL, you've got to be... You could argue it's more important to be a receiving back than a running back that can go between the tackles. And McCaffrey still isn't great between the tackles, but man, is he explosive. And man, can he catch the ball and run great routes. So he has been just a great offensive weapon. Call him whatever you want. But then on the other side, CJ Anderson, just probably had him a little high. He's still an okay veteran power back, but I am at an 81. He's not making much of an impact at this point. Just kind of a basic power back. So he's going to come down 3 to a 78. Christian McCaffrey, by the way, getting +2 from an 82 to an 84. And a speed boost as well of +1. And then we've got these receivers here. A lot of movement. Devin Funchess is going to get a +1. He's having a good year with Cam Newton. And then DJ Moore has really come on in the last couple weeks. Just an elite playmaker. Noticeable, he's going to get like +30 trucking. His trucking was like 45 rated by EA. And I swear I had that higher because that was something I had on a scouting report, is that this guy will run you over more than any receiver you can really find outside of maybe Jarvis Landry. Like, he runs powerful and quick. So he's definitely really good with the ball in his hands. He's even taken like 15 snaps at running back this year. But he's come on as a receiver. Has been good for this offense. And then Greg Olsen, who we lowered a couple weeks ago, he had just come off an injury and was looking kind of slow and not as big of an impact. Well, immediately after we do that, he rips off a couple good games in a row, some spectacular catches, looks a little sharper running routes, and has gotten more involved in this offense. So he's going to get 2/3 of that back. He's going to go back up to an 84. I still think he's older and on the downward slope, but maybe not in quite as big of a free fall as I had led on a couple weeks ago. And then we got Taylor Moulton. He really skyrocketed earlier in the year, but this is a guy who's emerging as one of the better right tackles in the NFL, having a really big breakout season on the right side of that line. So he's going to go up 1 again from a 74 to a 75. And then Mike Adams is going to have a big drop. Just one defensive player. We mentioned the defense has kind of been what we expected, but Mike Adams from an 80 to a 76, really struggling as the last barrier of defense there for the Panthers defense. So an A- for Carolina. And now we're going to move on to the Chicago Bears. The Bears are going to get a B+. And you look at this team heading into the year, a lot of hype. They trade for Khalil Mack. A lot of people had playoff expectations for this Bears team. I said competitive NFC, 8 to 9 wins for this Bears team. I still think they're about on pace for that. And then the offense has been about what I expected. It's been much better. But Trubisky, I still don't really trust him. I still think he's incredibly inaccurate. But he has shown some really nice things, both, I would say, athletically, his ability to scramble, though I do think he looks to run a little too early. But I will say his release looks fantastic, and his footwork is great inside the pocket. He looks like an NFL quarterback. It's just the second the ball leaves his hand, it looks nice, but it doesn't always go where it needs to go. So I've got my concerns about Trubisky. Defensively, this team is really, really taken a step up. And it's not just Khalil Mack, because Mack's been out the last few weeks, and this defense has arguably been better than they were with him. Obviously, you want Khalil Mack. He's going to make your defense better. I'm just saying it's not just Khalil Mack making an impact here. So let's talk about the players here. And B-plus grade for the year for Chicago. Just a good year. I think a lot of the expectations here, their record, you could say they've met, but they really don't have. And let me say, I'm lower on the Bears team in general. I think their wins, it's great. They're in first place in the division, but they really haven't beaten anyone. I know they beat Seattle, but it was in their own stadium, and that was a Seattle team that can't block anyone, and you've got Khalil Mack. It's just a good matchup for you. So I'd like to see this Bears team actually get a win over a Minnesota, a Green Bay down the stretch, or a Philadelphia. You know, they lost to New England. So we'll see. The second half of the year is going to be very telling. I think they've been kind of par for the course, my expectations for this team. Anyway, let's talk about the players here. Akeem Hicks needed some love. He has been fantastic, arguably the best run defender in the NFL this year, but he can rush the passer as well. So he's going to get a +2, 87 to an 89. I've always been a big Akeem Hicks guy. A lot of guys on this front seven are going to go up this week. So we got Roy Robertson Harris has been really solid. This is a player that was a project coming out of Texas El Paso. Think of a poor man's Marcus Davenport, who went in the first round, just a freak athlete. But Robertson Harris has put on about 30 pounds since coming out. He has converted from that edge rush to a 3-4 end here, and he's been great. He's been getting off blocks, making tackles, and run defense. Can rush the passer a little bit, but he's really just shown a lot of promise this year. So he's going to go up +4 from a 68 to a 72. Definitely a player to keep an eye on there in Chicago amidst this really talented defensive line. Eddie Goldman's been great. He got paid this offseason, and he's living up to the hype as that true nose tackle, run defending guy. Doesn't offer a whole lot in pass rush, but that's fine. He's a nose tackle. And then Bilal Nichols. This is a player we've talked about a couple times this year, a freak athlete, rookie out of Delaware. His reps have still been pretty limited. He's playing behind some really good players here, but when he's in, he flashes, and he's only going to continue to get better. He's an absolute freak of nature. I think a lot about Chris Smith. That's wrong. Anyway, keep moving. The D lineman for Kansas City, who was a third-round pick, just like Bilal Nichols, came in as a freak athlete, and you know, it's Smith. I'm having a hard time with names today. I'll cough it up to the fever. But Bilal Nichols, a guy I think is eventually going to get a starting role for this team and become a potential breakout player. So keep an eye on him. And then Danny Trevathan, we dropped him a few weeks ago, and ever since then, he has been fantastic. Tends to happen a good amount. But, you know, we'll auto-correct if players can return to what we know they're capable of pretty quickly after we lower them. And then Kyle Fuller is going to get a +1 here from an 81 to an 82. He's just having a really solid season. Granted, his best grade of the year just came against Buffalo. That's definitely a trend I've noticed with the PFF grades, is a lot of these secondary players that have gotten an opportunity to play Buffalo. Like, you look at their grades, it's like 70s, 80s, maybe a 40 in there, and then there's like a 95 against Buffalo, and that's just totally boosting up their grade on the year. But Fuller's been good outside of Buffalo as well. The same thing can be said about Eddie Jackson for this Bears secondary, who's not going to get a bump, but did play exceptional in that game against Buffalo a couple weeks ago. Or was that this week? I don't know. I can't remember. Those Buffalo games are very forgettable. So a B+ for Chicago. I'm going to try and pick up the pace here. I would like to keep this around an hour. It looks like we're probably going to go over. But we got the Dallas Cowboys here, who have had a bit of a train wreck year. Some injuries on that offensive line, which is the strength of that team, have not helped. I will say the defense, and I've said this a lot this year, the defense has been very much a pleasant surprise, especially in that front seven and Byron Jones in the secondary, who we already talked about. But still some holes. They need some safeties. They could probably use some other corners. Awuzie's been disappointing. And then offensively, they just have a lot of things to figure out. I am starting to really come around on that Amari Cooper trade because he's still young. I think they'll be able to make it work financially, and you're not going to get a better receiver than him in the draft. And they already showed that they can use him much better in the short game than Oakland ever did. So I am coming around on that trade. But the offensive line's got some problems right now. And Dak, is he the guy? I don't know, man. You got one more year, so you get to see with him on that rookie deal. He's only making like $900K. You really get a chance to evaluate this thing. But as it's going right now, I think it's time for Dallas to seriously consider alternate options. And I don't know if that means drafting a guy in the second round or signing a Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I think you need to consider the possibility that paying Dak Prescott $20 million or whatever might not be the best idea. Right now he's only making $900,000, so that's fine. I think he's Andy Dalton. I don't think he's super accurate moving the ball around the field. He's mobile. I trust him not to turn the ball over too much unless he's missing throws. So, he's fine, but you've got a certain ceiling with Dak Prescott, and you really need everything around him to be perfect if you want to win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott, which is the ultimate prize. So let's talk about the risers and fallers here. Connor Williams has been a disaster at left guard for the Cowboys. Guy out of Texas was a guy a lot of people liked in this draft, but an undersized player, was a left tackle in college, and now they've got him playing left guard inside the trenches. I think his best chance is going to be moving out to right tackle. I would just make that move because Landon Collins is sucking at right tackle, but he was really good at guard. Flip it around. See if Connor Williams can at least be kind of that crafty pass-blocking tackle and let Landon Collins maul in the trenches because Connor Williams is getting no movement in there. So Dallas needs to wake up and do something with Connor Williams because he's been a train wreck. So he goes down 1 from a 70 to a 69. We've got a +1 for Layton Vander from a 74 to a 75. Chidobe Awuzie has really struggled as of late. He's going to get a -2, 77 to a 75. A player that I like, but has really dropped off in terms of the grades. And then same thing can be said about Xavier Woods, -2, 76 to a 74, has been a non-factor this year. And Jeff Heath, veteran safety that I think they had higher expectations for, has not played very well, -2 down to a 75. So we're going to move on and talk about the Detroit Lions, who get a C- on the year. And the new coach, they're kind of in a bit of a rebuild here. They trade away Golden Tate, but they've made some moves, obviously trying to kind of reshape that front seven that is a very big part of the Patricia Belichick defense. And then in the secondary, they've got a lot of problems. Darius Slay, I think, might actually be the best corner in the NFL right now, but he's not getting a lot of help in that secondary, and the pass rush here is awful. So they're reshaping this roster. Offensively, they've taken a step back. They're still not able to run the ball, get any push from the offensive line. Stafford has not been very good this year. You got Kenny Golladay kind of emerging, but Marvin Jones is taking a step back. So they've got a long way to go. And I actually think trading away Golden Tate was the right move because I rip on these teams for a lack of kind of awareness for where you are and where you sit. I was critical of Green Bay for trading away Clinton Dix for a team that I think isn't that far away. But for Detroit to see that, they probably aren't going to make the playoffs this year. It's just, they just don't have the overall talent. or the culture or the identity right now. They have a window that's 4 years out probably. So they trade away Golden Tate, pick up a good pick for it, a 3rd round pick, and Golden Tate's a player they're going to lose anyway. So they're clearly looking at a bit of a, maybe not a full rebuild because you got Matthew Stafford, who I still think is pretty good, but kind of a throwaway year in a way, if that makes sense. So let's talk about the risers and fallers. Theo Riddick is going to get a -2. He has kind of disappeared with the new coaching staff here. I mean, obviously you got the same offensive play caller there, so that was kind of a stupid comment. But the emergence of Kerryon Johnson, reintroducing LeGarrette Blount here, or introducing him rather. Riddick has just kind of gone away. He's only played like 150 snaps. And just hasn't been that great when he's been in. So 78 to a 76 for Theo Riddick. And then TJ Jones is a player that showed some flashes last year. They kind of let him go and then brought him back. He makes the team, but he's been a non-factor. He's going to go -3 down to a 69. And then Frank Ragnow, this is not looking like the best pick right now. He was a center in college. He had kind of one of those big skyrocketing pre-draft rises where he went from like a 3rd rounder to a 1st rounder pretty quickly, which those can be kind of scary. It was the same thing about Layton Vander, who's obviously working out. But they moved him to guard here. And like I said, he was a center in college, so he's learning a new position. And he's just not doing a very good job as a run blocker, which was his bread and butter at Arkansas. So the offensive line in general, just again here, they really struggle, Detroit does, to develop these offensive line and get the most out of these guys and run the ball overall. So let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Shaun Robinson, we already talked about Deshaun Hand, another Alabama D lineman here, but Robinson is part of the rotation here. They obviously trade for Snacks Harrison as well, but they've got a really good interior group here to build around. I don't know how long Snacks is going to be there, but with Robinson and Hand, you've got some really good youth there. 2 really athletic, versatile interior guys there. So Shaun Robinson's going to go from a 75 to a 76. And then Sylvester Williams, just kind of a veteran, fading away here. -3, 75 to a 72. Interior D lineman there, not playing a whole lot. Then Teez Tabor has been... it's funny, we used to use the term GOAT to be like, Teez Tabor's been the GOAT, like, in a bad way. Now you say the GOAT, and everyone kind of throws that word around to say the guy's been great. But you get what I'm saying. Teez Tabor's not been very good. And I believe he's kind of been benched. I noticed his snap count just disappear here, but he's been picked on, and it's not working out. He's not a great athlete. He's a guy that really succeeded in college based on confidence and playmaking ability that he's clearly kind of lost. So he could kind of fade away and become irrelevant here pretty quick. He really has been that bad. He's a player I liked coming out just because of those ball skills, but he's not really shown that at the next level. And then just a note, Devin Canard I had as kind of that off-ball linebacker in my roster. That was a screw-up on my end. He's definitely, at least in this scheme, being used as an edge rusher, a defensive end, an edge linebacker. So his kind of ratings have completely changed from being more of a cover linebacker to more pass rush oriented. He is still a versatile guy. They do use him in coverage more than your average edge rusher, but that has been his primary role here, especially considering Once has been hurt and they've been asking Canard to do more off the edge. But I would imagine that Patricia sees him in kind of that same role that they used. God, I am struggling with the names today. The linebacker for the Patriots, not Kirkpatrick. Oh, man. All right, let's not hang up on this. You guys know who I'm talking about. Really good linebacker out of Alabama for the Patriots. So let's move on here. Detroit, again, a C-. And we're staying in the NFC North. We've got Green Bay. They're going to get a D+ on the season. And they still have a decent amount of talent on this roster. Certainly enough, I think, to get that Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. But the main concern for me has just been consistency and coaching here. Mental mistakes as well by the players have cost this team arguably 4 games. If you look at this team's kind of the way their losses have gone, they got 4 losses this year. You go to Washington, where you have 4 turnovers, essentially, as you have a fumble and 3 drops on 3rd down, 1 on 4th, just bad mistakes. And then you go to the Detroit game where Mason Crosby leaves 13 points on the board, missing field goals. You have a fumble in LA against, at the time, looked like the best team in football. Aaron Rodgers was going to have a chance down by 2 to go down and get a game-winning field goal. They were driving, about to take the lead in the 4th quarter on the Patriots when they fumble and then have no ability to kind of respond and bounce back from a fumble by the running back in the 4th quarter. So just stupid mistakes, inconsistency on offense. I think that Green Bay, along with Philly, is going to be a team that figures things out here in the second half, and right now is kind of their low point. But they do have a decent ways to climb back, and they're no guarantee to even make the playoffs. But I do think they're still a team that can beat anyone, and they've almost kind of proved that the last couple weeks. But definitely a bad season for Green Bay, who I had very high expectations for this year, had them in the NFC Championship. So a D+ for Green Bay. So let's talk about the risers and fallers for Green Bay. Randall Cobb has disappeared. He's been hurt. He's been bad when he's been in. You can say that about Randall Cobb for the last 2 years. So 77 to a 75. And then a rising receiver here, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, really was looking like a threat in that New England game. They did not have an answer for Scantling. I don't really know why Mike McCarthy was like not putting him on the field in the 4th quarter when they were trying to go down and win that game. He was trying to get cute with the rotations and stuff. Like, don't get cute. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was uncoverable in that game. They did not have an answer, and McCarthy just took him off the field. But regardless, he's really been rising over the last month and looks like a potential kind of freak athlete of a threat. 6'5" guy, 4'3", 840, and now showing really good ball skills. Definitely a player with a high ceiling paired with Aaron Rodgers that we're going to have to keep monitoring. And then on the offensive line, some movement here. Lane Taylor, who has really dropped off since he got paid a couple of years ago. I mean, he's just kind of a low-profile, undrafted guy that had a really good year when he was surrounded by probably the best offensive line that Green Bay has had a couple years ago. And then now things have dropped off a little bit, showing that he can't really create a whole lot by himself. But Corey Linsley has been healthy and really dominating at the center position, which is a lot saying that those guards have been just really kind of bad this year. But Corey Linsley, one of the highest rated pass blocking grades in the NFL, did really good, notably in that Rams game, which is also saying a lot as he's dealing with Donald and Sue in there, and Brockers nonetheless. So Corey Linsley having a great year. And then on the defensive side of the ball, just one guy to talk about here. Nick Perry has just been a non-factor. I think he only has 10 hurries or something. This is one of the worst contracts in the NFL. Green Bay is really stuck with Nick Perry for 3 more years, or 2 more seasons after this. He's going to be a $14 million cap hit next year. They cannot really get rid of that because a lot of it's still guaranteed. So really, really bad contract there for Nick Perry, who's looking like a low-end number 2 edge rusher. Like, they've got better production from Kyler Fackrell, getting paid like $600,000 there. So let's keep moving here. We've got the LA Rams, who are going to get an A-. Obviously, high expectations coming into the year. The offense has been just lights out, clicking on full cylinders from the quarterback to the line to the receivers to the running back. And then defensively, though, a lot of people thought this was going to be a really elite defense. I said pump the brakes because I didn't think the edge rush was any good and the linebackers really worried me. And that, Marcus Peters actually, and I'm definitely getting proved right this year on this, I said Marcus Peters from a coverage standpoint is not that much of an upgrade from what they had in Tremaine Johnson. Now, Peters is a ball hawk and a playmaker, but he's not really offering that this year like he did for the Chiefs last year. Just, clutch turnovers, like punching balls out, interceptions. So Peters has been a disappointment, and then Aqib Talib's been hurt, and he's older. So the secondary is really struggling as well. So that's where the A- comes in, is just the defense has really not done a good job, especially considering what they get from Aaron Donald every play. But obviously, A-, a good year for the Rams. They are cooling down, but a very good team. I still think, though, that the Rams could have, a bit of a downward trajectory here. And if they didn't win a playoff game again this year, I would not be stunned. Like, I think Jared Goff is having a great year. And we'll talk about him in just a second because he's actually going up. But I don't think Jared Goff is an elite quarterback at this point. I still think if you can get to him, their offense is going to crumble a little bit. So anyway, I don't want to spend time ripping on the Rams. They're having a great year. Let's talk about the risers and fallers for them. A lot of risers on the offensive side specifically. So Jared Goff is going to get a +2. Now, like I said, if you can get a rush on him, and this is kind of what Green Bay showed, getting that interior pressure on Jared Goff, he isn't going to be great under pressure. But you give him time with these receivers, and he throws as good a ball as anyone. He can be extremely accurate down the field, which is very rare. I've compared him to Matt Ryan, but I think he has clearly showed that he has a higher ceiling because of that arm, and he throws balls that I don't think Matt Ryan could fit in. So Goff's been great. He's going to go from a 79 to an 81. And then at running back, Malcolm Brown actually has been fantastic when he's been in. He's actually one of the highest rated running backs by PFF. Now, granted, he's coming in a lot late in games where defenses aren't trying as much, but he's actually rated higher than Todd Gurley this year. So he's going to go 71 to a 74. And then a +1 for Gerald Everett. Limited snaps. He's only playing like 16, 17 snaps a week, but I think that's going to go up because he has been a much better threat than Tyler Higbee. Just a much better athlete, a better receiver. So I think Everett is a guy that's going to be coming on here in the second half. And then Andrew Whitworth just needs some love. He's 36 years old, but he's still playing like one of the best tackles in the NFL. Such an asset for Sean McVay and Jared Goff to have that insurance at left tackle. And then Austin Blythe, just the under the radar, definitely the best pickup of the year. Like, in terms of value, he's been one of the best guards in the NFL, and they picked him up off of waivers from Indianapolis. Like, that's incredible. That's unheard of. And I don't know if you credit the offensive line coach, Sean McVay, or whatever. Everything seems to be rolling here for this offense, and when you do that with just a guy that's been rejected by the Colts, I mean, yeah, exactly. That says everything you need to know. And then at right tackle, Rob Havenstein is also going to get a +2, 79 to an 81. He's just a mauler, just an absolute beast, such a good asset in that run game. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball where we are going to have some fallers because these guys were rated pretty high coming into the year. These are big-name guys that are really not living up to the hype. It starts with Michael Brockers. We've seen this run defense struggle now for most of this season. Brockers, his grades are way down from what they've been the last year or two. The same thing can be said about Ndamukong Suh. He's getting up there in age, just not making the same impact. He's still a really good player, but definitely falling off a little bit. And then Marcus Peters, we just talked about him. He's going to go, Ndamukong Suh going from an 88 to an 85. And then Marcus Peters from an 85 to an 83. Really struggling in coverage the last couple weeks. And then LaMarcus Joyner, an undersized safety, off the charts grades last year and very much below average this year. So he's going to go -3 from an 82 to a 79. So it's not all rainbows and butterflies for the Rams. They need to figure out a lot of things on the defensive side, but that offense is just a monster right now. There's no way we're going to be at an hour here. We still got like 7 teams to talk about. But whatever. We'll keep moving. Try and pick up the pace. The Vikings, they're going to get a B-. They've dealt with a ton of injuries. I think they're another team that's really going to get hot in the last half of the year here. The defense is getting really hot. We'll talk about Danielle Hunter as a riser. He is coming on, and they just got Everson Griffin back. So starting to get that pass rush going. It's going to help those corners play better. Xavier Rhodes has had a rough year. But then offensively, I still don't necessarily trust the offense, though it has been very good. Kirk Cousins has been spectacular. But with that offensive line, you're still kind of playing with fire there. And we've seen it the last couple weeks, the offense, just always throwing corner routes to Thielen and Diggs when you are getting pressured like right after you snap the ball. Believe it or not, that's not a super sustainable offense. Even though the talent a lot of times is going to win out, it's not always going to work. And that's basically what their offense has been this year, corner routes and deep routes to those guys. Cousins has been a great fit for what they want to do there, but it's just not necessarily sustainable. So Minnesota, I gave them a B-. It probably could be a little higher, but they have had a bit of a rough season. But a lot of that is due to injuries. So let's talk about the risers and fallers for them. Laquan Treadwell has settled down a little bit. He really fell early after the Green Bay game where you could argue he cost them that game. At least, that was a mess of a game. You know what I'm saying? +2, 66 to a 68. That game was a tie if you're confused what I'm talking about. And then Mike Remmers at right guard, he's getting older. He's dropped off, 75 to a 73. Danielle Hunter really coming on as a pass rusher, leads the NFL in sacks. Just a monster. He could definitely continue to go up, but he's kind of had the last couple weeks really come on. He was a little slower to start the year. So 81 to an 83 for Danielle Hunter. And then Stephen Weatherly really stepped up with Everson Griffin out. He goes up +4 from a 66 to a 70, an edge rusher that really has played well and has been notable. And then Holton Hill, this is a player I really am keeping my eye on because I was honestly stunned that he was undrafted. And then Mike Zimmer picks him up and puts him in this defense. And I'm like, what a perfect fit, because Zimmer is probably the one coach in the NFL that I want to take a troubled young athlete who has a ton of upside. I mean, we're talking about a physical freak. It's 6'2", athletic, and a good college player that just had off-the-field issues. You put him with Zimmer, who can just get him focused and get him to play. This could be an absolute steal for the Vikings. You could argue, based on what Holton Hill has done the last couple weeks, especially if you look at the PFF grades, but I don't think it's any coincidence that their defense has played better with Holton Hill out there the last 2 weeks. That Holton Hill is their best cornerback. Xavier Rhodes, like I said, is not having a good year. So keep an eye on Holton Hill as the year goes on what his role becomes in that defense. I don't think it's any guarantee that he is not the best corner on that roster right now. So he's going to go +2 from a 68 to a 70, but obviously, based on that praise, could continue to go up fast. And then Harrison Smith, he's just going to come down a little bit, 95 to a 93. I mean, he's still one of the best safeties in the NFL, one of the 4 or 5 best in the league, but he was rated up there after having an incredible 95-something grade over the course of the season. He's at a 78 on this year or something like that. So he's just, not making as big of an impact, not as many big plays like we saw last year from Smith. So about a B for the Vikings on the year. I think they'll continue to play well as the season goes on. And then we've got the Saints here. They're going to get an A+. Probably don't need to spend a lot of time talking about the Saints. They've obviously been incredible this year. The defense is coming on, and offensively they just add Des Bryant rather. Best offensive line in football behind maybe the Rams, and an outstanding receiving core and Alvin Kamara. So they're just loaded, especially with their defense playing better. They get an A+. Let's talk about the risers and the fallers for them. Drew Brees is actually going to get a +2. He has narrowed that gap between Tom Brady, Rodgers, and Brees. He's right in there with them. We'll see if I actually lower Brady from 98, because Drew Brees has been better than Tom Brady this year, and I think that's pretty clear if you watch the tape. And the PFF grades back that up as well. So we'll see when we get to the AFC if Breeze and Brady. I don't think I would drop Brady to like a 95, but 98 to a 96 based on the way Brady's played this year. I don't know if that is out of the range of possibilities. So we'll see when we get there. And then we got Michael Thomas +2, 88 to a 90, emerging as probably a top 5 receiver. There's a lot of good receivers in the NFL. Michael Thomas is up there. And then Cameron Meredith, inversely, has not been what they were hoping. Had a big year in Chicago, but injuries have plagued him. Was not really able to become an impact on this team. So he's going to go from a 74 to a 72. Teron Armstead, our offensive lineman of the year, a +3 from an 87 to a 90, just a total stud. Strangely, Andrews Pete has like a 42 grade by PFF, not pass blocking or run blocking well. He's been the liability of that line if there is one. So he's going to get a -2 from a 74 to a 72. And then on the defense, just one guy to talk about here that's really come on the last couple weeks. Alex Anzalone had a great game against the Rams. Versatile linebacker who can cover, so he's going to go from a 68 to a 70. All right, we're getting a little closer here. We got the New York Giants, who is another team we probably don't need to spend a lot of time on. No one really wants to watch this team anyway. The offense, it basically just comes down to a terrible offensive line and Eli Manning being one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL over the last 3 or 4 years that they're holding on to because he's got a couple Super Bowls. Just another evidence for why Super Bowl ring is one of the most overrated things you can assign to a quarterback for how good of a quarterback they are. But the age regression has not been great for Eli either. And then defensively, there is nothing to really talk about for the Giants. Like, they're whatever. They're super, super meh defensively. So the risers and fallers for the Giants getting an F on the year, by the way, so they are right there with the Cardinals. The big part of that F is passing on the quarterback for Saquon Barkley. Now, Sam Darnold has looked really bad the last couple weeks, so maybe that's shifting. Darnold just needs to learn how to take care of the football, but all these quarterbacks are kind of getting a pass for me this year just because none of them, all the rookie quarterbacks, none of them are having any help from their team. So, Darnold, it's going to be a wait-and-see thing, but with how good Saquon Barkley's been, it's coming back a little bit the other way, but I still would rather have Darnold based on how bad Eli's been. So the risers and fallers, Evan Ingram, -3. I know he's been hurt, but when he's been in there, has not been as big of an impact at a breakout year. So he's just going to come down a bit, 82 to a 79. Patrick Omema, part of the offensive line problems here, 72 to a 70. He might be losing his job to the recently acquired Jamon Brown from the Rams. And then Dalvin Tomlinson, good interior guy, but having a down year, 81 to a 79. And then Janoris Jenkins has been a problem for that secondary. He's the best thing they have. This is one of the worst groups of corners in the entire NFL. But he had a breakout year a couple years ago, and he has not lived up to that. 84 to an 82. And then this one kind of hurts because Landon Collins is one of my favorite players to watch. He's going to come down from that superstar tier of 90+, just down 1 to an 89. He's still a fantastic player, and I think he could easily get back to that superstar tier in a better situation, but just really not helping things out a lot for this defense right now. He's been fine. He's been their best defensive player, I would say, but just hasn't really shown that 90+ superstar ability this year. And then staying in the NFC East, we've got the Eagles. I mentioned this is a team that I think is going to have a really good second half of the year. I like the Golden Tate trade. Just going to give them someone to get rid of the ball quick. The offensive line hasn't been as good, so they're kind of learning how to adapt offensively without as dominant of a run game and without as much time to throw the ball vertically. Golden Tate is going to be perfect for helping that out. And then defensively, they get Timmy Jernigan back. They have played much better defense in the last few weeks. I think their defensive front seven has really come on. I still don't love their corners, and I don't know if they're ever going to be like a top 5 defense like they were at the end of last year. But a very, very good team, I think, heading into the second half of this season. I think they're almost a lock at this point to win that division with the injuries in Washington. So just three players moving here, three guys falling for the Eagles. So Corey Clement, I thought was going to do much better when Ajayi got hurt. A couple of weeks now, he just has not really stepped up. Like, he's fine, he's a good receiving back, but kind of proving that he might not be a true starting running back in this league. And then Nelson Aguilar has not played well. He had a breakout year last year, and they trade for Golden Tate now, which is going to kind of render Aguilar less useful. Luckily, his run blocking grade has been the best asset he's got this year, so he can block out on the edge for Golden Tate, who they're going to throw a lot of screens to. But he's going to kind of disappear, I think, in terms of production. And then on the defensive side, Corey Graham, with the injury to Rodney McLeod, Corey Graham, has been kind of that third safety here, but being asked to be the starter now with the injury to Rodney McLeod, he has not stepped up and has not proved himself as a deep cover man. So the 49ers are the next team here. Kind of a tough team to assign a grade to because their record has not been as good as I thought it would be, but obviously you lose a star quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo. But they've done some really nice things, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. You look at what they've done with this offensive line, getting George Kittle going. They've gotten some production from these quarterbacks, C.J. Beathard and of course, Nick Mullins last week against the Raiders. So we'll talk about the risers for them in a second on the offensive side. Defensively, though, this is where the minus comes in because while you're optimistic for what this offense is going to look like in the future, if they can add some better weapons, get Jerick McKinnon back, get Matt Breida healthy, for God's sakes. So you look at the defense, and a lot of the young players on this defense have not stepped up. Really, all of the guys you were excited about on this defense have been below expectations, I would say. So a lot of movement here as we take a grander look at the 49ers. Nick Mullins is going to go up +3. He looked good, don't get me wrong, but you're playing the Raiders, a very bad defense, possibly the worst defense in NFL history. So let's see it again before we say he's the next Tom Brady. But did look good. Give him that. He's going to go 57 to a 60. Raheem Mostert has looked pretty solid there as kind of a speedy back. +3 from a 67 to a 70. Kendrick Bourne has been a big piece of this offense. Really good run blocking grades on the year. I don't think there's too much there, but 67 to a 68 for Kendrick Bourne. A big jump here for George Kittle, who's been probably behind Travis Kelce, the best tight end in the NFL this year. Just incredible. And he blocks, too. And I think Travis Kelce is a great comparison for George Kittle. So Kittle's going to go 80 to an 83. And, man, I think Jimmy Garoppolo cannot wait to get back and throw the ball to this version of George Kittle. That catch he had against the Raiders, the one-handed catch where he then shrugs off two defenders and then outran the entire defense, like that is a superstar play right there. And then this offensive line has been the biggest reason for optimism. I mean, talk about Jimmy Garoppolo getting excited to come back. Joe Staley's getting older, so who knows if he's going to be there, but I'm sure he is very excited to play behind this offensive line. So Mike Person, +3 from a 70 to a 73. Mike McGlinchey looking like one of the best picks in the draft. I thought he reminded me a lot of Taylor Lewan coming out. Just a big, athletic dude, really dominant run blocker, and he's coming on as a pass blocker. He's going to get better, I think, over time. But, I mean, he's looking like a guy that probably should have been a top 5 pick. I think a lot of the teams with bad offensive lines up there are wishing they had him. Like the Giants, like, would you rather Mike McGlinchey or Saquon? Like, I think that's a conversation to be had. And a lot of people aren't going to like that because Saquon's so fun. But you got to understand how rare it is to find a franchise tackle like Mike McGlinchey looks like right now. And then Joe Staley is going to go down too. Still a nice player, but his grades have dropped off pretty dramatically. So 89 to an 87 for Joe Staley, who is 34 years old. And then the defense, Sheldon Day, kind of a sort of a journeyman, younger player though, but a good athlete, but not playing super well in the interior there. 72 to a 70. Akello Witherspoon had really high expectations heading into the year, but he's been really bad. He's been one of the worst starting corners in the league this year. So Akello Witherspoon, 75 to a 73. Pardon the sirens. I don't know what's going on out there. And then both the safeties here had pretty high hopes for this team coming into the year for the safeties. Jeez, that is close. Adrian Colbert, -2, 74 to a 72. Kind of a breakout year last year, but has been real bad. One of the worst safety grades in the NFL this year. And then Jaquiski Tart, part of the NFL All Names team, right there, starting next to Clinton Dix, I guess. -1, just has not been as good as he was last year. 76 to a 75. All right, Seattle here. We're getting closer to the end. We're at least going to be under an hour and a half for sure. Seattle's been kind of the team, going back to my deep dive, that I said they would be. Now, getting Earl Thomas injured definitely hurt the ceiling of that defense, but a scrappy team. No one wants to play this team. They might not be a playoff team when all is said and done, but they've really been par for the course for my expectations for this team this year. One notable thing, and this will transition into our first two risers here, they've done a good job of boosting the pass production of this offensive line. So Seattle's going to get a B on the year, just kind of par for the course. But the pass protection from DJ Fluker and Jermaine Ifedi on the right side of that line has been very good. Now, these guys have really struggled as run blockers, but Seattle will take it, considering how much Russell Wilson's been running for his life in the last couple years. So Fluker, +2 from a 71 to a 73, and Jermaine Ifedi starting to settle down a little bit as a pass blocker. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Rasheem Green, -2, has not been a factor here. Didn't necessarily think he would be coming into the year. He was a raw prospect coming out of USC, kind of that freak athlete, Michael Bennett type, can play on the edge, can play on the inside, but still developing. He's a young player. I think he could turn into a nice starter in this league, if not even more, but just might need a little while. So he's going to come down from a 73 to a 71. And then Tedric Thompson, the free safety here, hasn't been spectacular. It's been a good drop-off from Earl Thomas, but has settled in as the starter here and has had some nice games. He's been a little inconsistent, but 69 to a 70 for Tedric Thompson. So we've got two teams left, and we'll be all done. We've got Tampa Bay here. They're going to get a C on the season. They've done some nice things offensively. Signing Fitzpatrick was the best thing they could have done, because Jameis has been terrible. So there's that at least, but defensively, it's a mess. And they really botched this offseason because they signed Bo Allen, they signed Mitch Unrein. I think Unrein got hurt, but then they draft Vita Vea when they could have had Derwin James. Whatever they did to address this pass rush, which was signing Vinny Curry and Jason Pierre-Paul, did not work. So the defense has been a mess. They have nobody in the secondary. So they're going to get a C. I thought things were going to be a mess for Tampa Bay, and they really have been. So let's talk about the risers and the fallers. Things have been pretty good offensively. Adam Humphries has actually really impressed me this year. I was working a route analysis for PFF, and he was actually really good route runner, not just slants and the typical slot receiver stuff, posts and getting open over the middle of the field. Looking really good, and he's come on over the last couple weeks, so he's going to go up +2. The receivers here in Tampa Bay, I think it's probably the best receiving core, at least 1 through 4. You got Humphries, Godwin's coming on this year, obviously Mike Evans, and then Deshaun Jackson, who, by the way, I can't believe they didn't trade Deshaun Jackson. But that's another conversation. I just don't like what this front office has done in general over the last year. But then O.J. Howard is going to get a +2 as well, 79 to an 81. I believe he's actually the highest-rated tight end in the NFL this year. I loved him coming out. I thought that was a steal when they got him, and he's meeting that potential and has really opened things up for this offense. We've seen with Travis Kelce and Gronk what an elite tight end can do in terms of causing headaches for defensive coordinators. O.J. Howard definitely in the conversation there, along with George Kittle now in San Francisco. So The receivers are stock up, but offensive line, DeMar Dotson, getting older, is still a good right tackle, really good pass protector, but offering nothing from the run game. This team just can't run the ball in general, but he's not helping. So -4, 84 to an 80 for DeMar Dotson. And then on the defensive side, the defensive lineman, Vinny Curry, has been a train wreck. He has done nothing for this team, just 10 hurries on the year, 76 to a 74. Just not working out there. And then Vita Vea, -1 again, 77 to a 76. They brought him in to be a nose tackle, and his run defense grades are terrible this year. He's very young in his career. He could still figure things out. But obviously, a 76 rookie is still very good. He was supposed to come in. Like, you take a nose tackle in the top 14 in 2018 where run defense doesn't really matter. That player better freaking come in and be Haloti Nada. Be Vince Wilfork. Or what a wasted pick. Like, you can find these guys. So to take that player ahead of a Derwin James, ahead of a Jair Alexander, what a bad pick if he can't turn this thing around fast and become Vince Wilfork, because that position just doesn't matter in the NFL today. It's a simple truth. And then we got Brent Grimes, who's just 36 now, having a terrible year. He's going to go -4 from an 81 to a 77. The Bucs just don't have an answer in the secondary this year, but they could have. Like, you put Derwin James or Jair Alexander back there, things might be a little different. I don't think it changes the entire scope of their defense, but you at least got something to be optimistic on that side of the ball. So that's rough. I've been rough on Tampa all year, but they've not done a good job in that front office, I don't think. So our last team here, Washington, who I was high on coming into the year and low on the last couple weeks as people were rising on them. Offensively, they just have a low ceiling. You get that with Alex Smith, but you also get that with an aging offensive line that's been beat up without really any true elite receiving weapons, or a running back that's an elite receiving weapon. So, the offense has been whatever, below average. And then the defense is just a feisty defense. They can turn the ball over, but they have holes that you can attack. So it's just a super average team. I think they'll probably finish around 7-8 wins. The injuries do not help. This was a team that had a chance to possibly make a run at that NFC East, but I just don't see it happening at this point. We'll see. Crazier things have happened, and they are, I think, still in first place. But I don't like this team nearly as much as I like Philly right now. So the risers and fallers here, we got quite a bit to wrap this thing up. But Alex Smith, -2, just has seriously dropped off production-wise from what he had in Kansas City. Not a big surprise. We see what Patrick Mahomes is doing with that team. It's just a different situation, but we're just being reminded of kind of the ceiling that is Alex Smith, of being that game manager type, which is exactly what we've seen this year. And then Jordan Reed, coming down again, and it's weird because, like I said a couple weeks ago, it's usually been if he's healthy, he's a dominant tight end, but it's just not the case. He hasn't been nearly the player he once was. He's still a solid receiving weapon. He's a good security blanket, but there was a time when he was one of the most dangerous receivers in the NFL, and he's just not that anymore. He's had too many injuries. And then Brandon Scherff has dropped off this year. 87 to an 85. Jordan Reed, by the way, -3 from an 86 to an 83. And then Trent Williams as well, just aging, collecting too many injuries. It's clearly affecting his game, 90 to an 88. He's still a very good left tackle, but again, a player that at a time I would have considered the best left tackle in the NFL, just hasn't been that for 2 years now. Jamison Crowder, I get that he's been hurt, but when he's been in there has not been very good, and in general I probably just had him rated a little too high based on what other slot receivers are on my roster, so 78 to a 76. I still think he's one of the best slot receivers in the NFL, that said. Excuse me. And then we got Preston Smith getting a +1 this week. He's really come on with a lot of guys in this front seven. A versatile edge rusher who can cover a little bit as well. So 75 to a 76 for Preston Smith. Part of a front seven here as well with Ryan Anderson going from 70 to a 71. Really versatile player. He kind of fits that Alabama kind of hybrid outside linebacker as well, who can cover, rush the passer, play run defense really well. So I really like what this team has done in the front seven. It's definitely the best part of this team. And they're kind of getting a little bit of that Baltimore thing where they're just getting a bunch of Alabama players and just plugging them in and letting them go to work. The Nick Saban factory. As, again, they trade for HaHa Clinton-Dix, another Alabama guy. But HaHa Clinton-Dix is going to come down 3. And he was actually the second highest rated safety by PFF just 2 weeks ago. And I mentioned the thing with Buffalo earlier in this podcast. Well, that was by far Clinton-Dix's best game was Buffalo. He put up like a 96 in that game against Buffalo. A lot of safeties have put up 90-plus grades against Buffalo specifically. But you look at the rest of his games, not very good. And in just 2 weeks, he was the second-rated safety. He puts up a 56 against the Rams, and then in his first start with Washington against the Falcons, a 44. He goes for just a fourth-round pick. Green Bay, who has no safeties, was willing to part with him. It's looking like he might not be as good as we had thought just 2-3 weeks ago. I still think he's a very good player, instinctive, ball skills, but his tackling ability has never been very good. He's not the best athlete if you go back and look at him coming out. A lot of scouting reports said this guy, if he wasn't at Alabama, would have been a third or a fourth round pick. So I still think he's a very good safety, but probably need to lower the expectations here for Clinton-Dix just a little bit. So he's going to go from an 83 to an 80, which is still going to put him in that top 24 in terms of safeties in the league, but much closer to, I guess, that kind of basic starter than any kind of superstar. And then Monty Nicholson, the reason they went out and traded for HaHa Clinton-Dix is because of how bad Monty Nicholson, who had a breakout year last year, has been. So Monty Nicholson going to go -4 from a 76 to a 72. So Washington has some issues in that secondary. They got some talent. I think they'll figure some things out and continue to be sort of that top 12 to 14 scrappy defense with a low ceiling offense for the rest of the year. In general, they've had a pretty good year, Washington, getting a B on the year. So I'm going to go chug some water because my throat was already all kind of screwed up from this cold. But now I'm just exhausted. I really hope you guys enjoy the podcast. I know it's different from our traditional studs and duds, but do hit that like button if you made it this far. Again, I'm going to try and get this thing over to Google Play and iTunes as soon as possible. I'm going to try and keep these things under an hour. That show on Tuesday will be my goal, to be around an hour or less, just because this is a little longer. But hopefully the sound of my nasally voice wasn't too bad for if you're working or doing whatever. So cheers as always, guys. We will see you on Tuesday in podcast format for the AFC midseason review. Peace out, guys.